The Combatribes was released in the arcades in 1990. Technos brought this game to the Super Nintendo in 1992, and that's going to be the version that we're playing today. There are several differences between the two versions, mostly with the story. It's kind of an odd story, but hey, it's what you should expect from a beat 'em up around this time. Anyway, let's talk about it. As far as I can tell, the story was completely created for the SNES release. It's almost played for comedy, at least I thought it was. There's quite a few jokes in it, especially in the cutscenes, but yeah, it's kind of an odd story. The characters are all cyborgs, apparently, and they're being sent to New York City to fight against some gang called Ground Zero. I need to say this, it was made in 1990 and released in 1992, so no, it had nothing to do with really anything that happened in the 2000s. The leader of Ground Zero is a woman, apparently, who used to fight alongside your three characters. Apparently she went crazy and is like an early model of the cyborgs that you are. Why she decided to create a terrorist organization is really beyond me, but whatever. Maybe she realized she was being sent on just some stupid mission like this one, which could easily have been solved by, I don't know, any law enforcement agency out there. Really, any of them could have done this, but apparently it falls to this weird military group. That's really it. That's all the story you're going to get. You're given the character names, their motivations, and a little bit of backstory. It isn't anything amazing, and it doesn't need to be. It's good enough for a game in 1992. Stories in this don't really matter a whole lot unless they're just really terrible or non-existent. That's the only time you can really complain about a story. Or if it's like Super Double Dragon, just fucking weird. So this is a really strange beat 'em up from a gameplay standpoint. You aren't walking through a level like you would be in, Double Dragon, Streets of Rage, or Final Fight. It feels a little bit like a single screen game. And I say that with a caveat that I'll get to in a second. But depending on whether you're playing in single player or in two player, there's going to be anywhere between 5 and probably 7 sprites on the screen. That's pretty standard for a beat 'em up around this time, so that's not too crazy. But I do want to get back to this. How you move through the game really makes it feel more like a fighting game than a beat 'em up, because you scroll left and right a little bit, and then the screen kind of stops. It's like you're playing something like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, where you can do that. You'll scroll a little bit, but then the screen will stop because they don't want you to keep going in one direction. That's the way this feels. Once you beat up a bunch of the enemies, which isn't too hard, they will gang up on you like in every other beat 'em up, but you have a lot more options to fight people off. Like just picking up one of the enemies and bashing their head into the ground, or spinning them around, or really just standing them back up. There's a lot of stuff you can do to the enemies in this. Once you've beaten up all the regular enemies, you might get that pretty familiar go left or go right or move left, move right sign. Once that pops up, you walk in that direction and the boss appears, just out of nowhere. He'll give you a little bit of dialogue, and then you fight him and a couple of enemies. Usually like one, but you might get 2 at some point. It's kind of nice that they're there, but then they just sort of stop being there once you've gotten rid of your big bad boss guy's weapon. There are 3 playable characters in this game, and yeah, that's kind of standard. I feel like I could cut and paste this into most beat 'em ups. Once you die, you can switch between them, so that's kind of cool. You can get up to 7 continues in this, which is pretty awesome, until you realize that you only have 1 life per continue. That kind of sucks. I didn't really like that part of the game, and I would have wanted either unlimited continues and 3 lives, or at least 3 lives with each continue. That would have been a lot better. But, it's not really the end of the world, so yeah, I could kind of take that or leave it. One thing I do like are these little combos and extra moves that you can use against the enemies. You can pick up an enemy and throw them, you can swing them around, you can smash their heads into the ground, you can knock their heads together. It's a really cool way of doing things that sort of breaks up some of the monotony of just walking around and punching and kicking your enemies in the face. That was really what this was. It felt a little bit more repetitive than a lot of the other beat 'em ups that I've played. One of the biggest letdowns in this, and there's a chance that I wasn't doing this right, but the special attacks in this are kind of stupid. I have no idea what the hell's going on with them because they feel like just a regular attack that you would do. Like, if you didn't have the manual, you would just kind of luck into it. Your character gets like a running start, and then he'll do one of like a few different things. So each character will, I don't know, do like a running jump kick, like a big uppercut or a headbutt or something. It's really kind of stupid. Now, once you've beaten the game, you can do like a one-on-one fighting game. So that's kind of cool. And then you can see all of the different characters in this game and see what their special attacks are and everything, and just get used to some of the controls with those different characters. That's pretty awesome. I love that. But yeah, it's aside from that, it's not really anything that's going to blow your mind. The boss fights can be really annoying. Your characters move pretty slow, and the boss has just a really big kill zone in front of them. The bosses all start with a weapon, which makes it even more annoying because sometimes it extends their reach, sometimes it makes it harder for you to get close to them, and you don't really have a whole lot of options to really maneuver your way in there to get to them. And then when you knock the weapon away from them, it doesn't always help. Sometimes it makes things considerably worse. It was god awful when I was fighting one guy at the I think it's on the clown stage I was fighting him. He breathes fire or he spits like alcohol into a torch or something. Once you knock that away from him, he starts jumping around like an asshole. And it's just really annoying to try to fight him. One of the very odd things about this game is there's just a lack of items. There's no like health items, there's no weapons that you pick up. Unless I completely missed something. I didn't find any of that stuff. I didn't find a whole lot of like destructible things that you could break, like the different ones are like mailboxes or fire hydrants or trash cans or stuff like that. I didn't see any of that in this game, and it got really annoying. So I've got an edit here because apparently I did more research on this than I thought. There were items in the arcade versions, and the stages were a lot bigger. They were changed and just made the game smaller, but they added a story into it, so we had that trade-off, which, sure, I guess that helps. Overall, I think it's a pretty fun game. I do like the sort of like the basic gameplay to it, but I think it's a little rough around the edges. And yeah, I would rather be playing Final Fight or even Pirates of the Dark Water than playing this one. This looks like it could have been a Double Dragon game, which makes a lot of sense because Technos made it. They also made Double Dragon. The sprites look really well detailed. Each stage looks pretty unique. The enemies match the stages. It's pretty awesome. The stages did make me feel like I was playing a cartoon version of the Warriors. It did not have any of the violence. There were some memorable lines, but nothing like the Warriors. And unfortunately, the stages really weren't all that big because, well, they had to change some stuff in order to get this to the Super Nintendo. I did mention this earlier, but yeah, it looks an awful lot like you're playing a fighting game, just with how the stages are set up and how they kind of scroll in a certain way. Even though the levels are pretty small, they have a lot of detail. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in them. And it doesn't really impact the game as far as, like, slowdown. Your characters move sluggish anyway, but it's not because, there's slowdown or anything like that. It just seems to be the way the game is. The story gets told to you in cutscenes, which you've seen in the intro and also in the story section of this video. They look pretty awesome. I kind of was expecting something close to this when I found out there were cutscenes in it, just simply because that's the way they had to do it at the time. The game just comes to a stop, and you'll see some text on the screen, and then when you beat the stage, you get a picture of, it's basically a taunt screen. The enemy's beaten up, and you just sort of run him down a little bit, and then he gives you some information which doesn't really help, but points you in the direction of the next person you're going to have to beat up. It gets the job done, and it's pretty great. It really does feel like a single-screen game at times. Even though that's not a great comparison, calling it a fighting game would probably be more accurate, or at least looking like a fighting game would be more accurate. But yeah, I got the feeling I was playing a single-screen arcade game, or at least a 16-bit single-screen arcade game. It's very weird. I do love the Double Dragon art style and everything. Just the way things look. I like the fact that you're playing as this big bruising character, and especially in the second stage where you're beating the crap out of clowns. I just find that hilarious. All of the enemies look really unique, and the backgrounds look great. It's just a really good-looking game. If there was such a thing as like a starter beat 'em up or a beginner beat 'em up, much like there are starter RPGs, then I think Combatribes would fit into that pretty easily. There really are no major flaws with the game. You just have the regular annoyance with some other beat 'em ups that you might have played. It's got a lot of little issues that kind of add up over time that would probably bring this thing's review score down a little bit for me. But there's nothing that I can say that's just, okay, this is broken beyond belief and terrible. It's a playable game. It's a lot of fun. It's got a goofy story that's kind of interesting. I like the characters. It's a pretty fun game. It does feel like it probably should have been a Double Dragon game or a spin-off of Double Dragon in some way. I don't think that this is a game I would probably return to, though. It's fine, there just isn't anything that was really special enough to make me want to come back multiple times. It is a cool thing to see, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.